Hello, sunshines, and welcome back to another session. In this session, we're going to be talking about the box model. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So here we have it, the introduction to the box model. So browsers load HTML elements with default position values. This often leads to an unexpected and unwanted user experience while limiting the views you can create. In this lesson, you will learn about the box model, which is an important concept to understand how elements are positioned and displayed on a website. If you have used HTML and CSS, you have unknowingly seen aspects of the box model. For example, if you have set the background color of an element, you may have noticed that the color was applied not only to the area directly behind the element, but also to the area to the right of the element. Also to the area to the right of the element. Also, if you have aligned text, you know it is aligned relative to something. What is that something? All elements on a web page are interpreted by a browser as living inside of a box. This is what is meant by the box model. For example, when you change the background color of an element, you change the background color of its entire. In this lesson, you'll learn about the following aspects of the box model. One, the dimensions of an element's box. Two, the borders of an element's box. Three, the paddings of an element's box. And four, the margins of an element's box. So let's begin. See. Okay, so here in our instructions, it says take some time to explore the code to the right. See if you can figure out how these following CSS properties impact how an element is displayed. Okay, so here's the padding. Let's see if we change the padding to like 40. What happened? Do we see anything? Okay, let's see where navigation is really quickly in our HTML. Okay, this is the navigation. So local, national, the terminal, global, all of this is what we just changed the padding of. So let's go back here and change the padding back to 0 and see if we can see a difference over here. Let's go ahead and run that. There is a difference. There were like bullet points when the padding was 40. Interesting. Let's see what scroll. We have width. Let's change the width here. This is for our banner. So if we go here, and we know that this is an ID. This is a class. This is an ID. So if we go back here, we find division ID banner, and this would be our ID. So here on the right, this is what we're going to be editing in our CSS file. And we're just going to go here, scroll down to banner and change the width to 50. Let's see what changes over here. I'm gonna run that. Okay. You see what happens when we adjust the width. I'm gonna change that back to 100%. And I wonder what overflow does. Just I did not see overflow here. All right, we're just gonna move on. Next. All right, so the box model. This is a really good visual. So the box model comprises the set of properties that define parts of an element that take up space on a web page. The model includes the content area's size, width and height, and the element's padding, order, and margin. The properties include width and height, which is the width and the height of the content area, padding, which is the amount of space between the content area and the border, which is the thickness and style of the border surrounding the content area and padding, and then the margin, which is the amount of space between the border and the outside edge of the element. So now we're going to take a look at the image on the right, which is a visual representation of the box model. And then we can open the box model image in a new tab to reference it as we move through the lesson. Okay, let's do that. All right, this is just going to be here for reference. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Next. So height and width. An element's content has two dimensions, height and a width. By default, the dimensions of an HTML box are set to hold the raw contents of the box. The CSS height and width properties can be used to modify these default dimensions. In this example, above here, the height and width of paragraph elements are set to 80 pixels here and 240 pixels respectively. The PX in the code above stands for pixels, as we know. Pixels allow you to set the exact size of an element's box, the width and height. When the width and height of an element are set in pixels, it will be the same size on all devices. An element that fills a laptop screen will overflow a mobile screen. Okay, what does that mean? So overflow defines how a block level element should handle content that goes beyond its boundaries. This is shorthand for overflow X and overflow Y. That's weird. Okay, I need a visual. Let's go back to our learning. So overflow defines how a block level element should handle content that goes beyond its boundaries. Okay. All right, so instructions, we're going to add a height of 700 pixels to our banner ID. So scroll here. This is banner. We have a width of 100%. We're just going to go ahead and add our height in there. Height of 700 pixels. 700 px. Looks about right to me, or a semicolon. Oh wow, look at that. That looks completely different. Let's go ahead and run that. Nice. Then we're going to set the dot pool dash quote class width to 350 pixels. So let's go ahead and find pool dash quote, scroll. And here it is here. We're going to set the width to 350 pixels. And a semicolon. Let's run that. But first, I want to see what the pull code is. Let me scroll here, and that is indeed a class. So I'm looking at the class attributes specifically, and here it is. Div with the class attribute of pull quote. So the text that we're looking at is this here. Let's go ahead and navigate to it on the right. The league embraces. Alrighty, so it's gonna be this portion right here. The league embraces, etc. We're gonna set that to 350 pixels and then watch how it changes. All right, so let's go ahead and run that. Let's see what happens. Oh, I put a space in between 350 pixels. All right, now let's run that. Okay, so now it stops here. And before it stopped, where the rest of the text stopped. Okay. So now we're gonna set the banner ID. Oh, set the banner ID content H1 width to 400 pixels. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay, here it is. Like this is a little complex. All right, now we're gonna set the width. Width. Let's face that. We're gonna set the width to 400 pixels. And do our semicolon here. Now I like to see exactly where this would be at. So we're gonna find an H1 element, and then we're gonna find an H1 element, and then a content class with a banner ID. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Right. Okay, here's the H1 element with the content class and the ID banner. So here is the text that we are going to be looking at here in the browser. It's going to be right here. Let's go back to our CSS file. And since we went ahead and already input this here, we're going to go ahead and run it. See how it changes. Nice. All right, moving along. All right, so now borders. A border is a line that surrounds an element like a frame around a painting. Borders can be set with a specific width, style, and color. The width, the thickness of the border. A border's thickness can be set in pixels with one of the following keywords: thin, medium, or thick. The style is the design of the border. Web browsers can render any of 10 different styles. Some of these styles include none, dotted, and solid. And lastly, the color. So which this is the color of the border. Web browsers can render colors using different formats, including 140 built-in color keywords. Nice. In the example above, the border has a width of 3 pixels, a style of solid, and a color of coral. All three properties are set in one line of code. Border 3 pixels, solid, and the color is coral. Nice. The default border is medium none color, where color is the current color of the element. If width, style, or color are not set in the CSS file, the web browser assigns the default value for that property. In this example, the border style is set to solid here, and the color is set to coral, and the width is not set, so it defaults to medium. So 240 pixels must be medium. Right. Now, moving on, we're going to add a dotted red border with 1 pixel thickness to all H2 headings. Okay, we can do that. Okay, here's H2 headings. Um, we're gonna do a border, border, dotted. We're gonna say dotted. This is gonna be an example. So none, dotted, and solid. We're gonna do dotted in this case with a 1 pixel thickness. So 1 pixel thickness, dotted, and then red. And that's going to be all H2 elements. So let's just look for H2 really quickly before we run that. So the league embraces responsible diversify EEE here. So we're basically putting a border over this, a red border. So then that's H3, it's H2. Okay, that looks like the only H2 element, so that's what we're going to be focused on. Let's go ahead and run that. Dotted red border with 1 pixel thickness. That's what it looks like. All right, now we're going to add a solid white border with a 3 pixel width to the banner.content H1 label. So let's scroll here. Now we're going to do border 3 pixel. And I'm just following this syntax up here. So border 3 pixel is going to be solid white and then press semicolon. And a solid white border with 3 pixel width. Yep, that looks about right. And I like to see exactly what I'm looking at. So here it's going to be this text right here to the right in our browser. Let's run it. Now we have a border. All right, moving on. Now, a border radius. Ever since we revealed the borders of boxes, you may have noticed that the borders highlight the true shape of an element's box, square. Thanks to CSS, a border doesn't have to be a square. You can modify the corners of an element's border box with the border radius property. Mhm. The code in the example above will set all 4 corners of the border to a radius of 5 pixels, i.e., the same curvature that a circle with a radius of 5 pixels would have. You can create a border that is a perfect circle by creating an element with the same width and height, and then setting the radius equal to half of the width of the box, which is 50%. So here's an example. The code in the example above, creates a div that is a perfect circle. Interesting. So the height and the width are set to the same value, and then the border radius is at 50%, and that's how we create a perfect circle, I suppose. So now we're going to move on. In the style.css file, set the border radius of banner.content h1 to 15 pixels. Let's scroll. I'm going to go ahead and do banner dash radius. Oh, border radius. Border radius, and then we're going to set that to 15 pixels. Semicolon. Additionally, try experimenting with other border radius values and running your code to see the results. All right, let's run it. Oh, nice. Now we have a little bit of curved edges. Let's try 30 pixels. Yeah, it didn't really look like much change here. Let's try 50 pixels. Okay, it is slowly but surely changing. Let's do 100 pixels. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's try 200. We were gonna keep on doubling. Oh, that looks weird. Whatever. It's kind of starting to look the same. 800. Yeah. All right. Let's take it back down to 15. Awesome. All right, next. Padding. So the space between the contents of a box and the borders of a box is known as padding. Padding is like the space between a picture and the frame surrounding it. Okay. In CSS, you can modify this space with the padding property. So the code in this example puts 10 pixels of space between the content of the paragraph, which is the text, and the borders on all 4 sides. The padding property is often used to expand the background color and make the content look less cramped. If you want to be more specific about the amount of padding on each side of a box content, you can use the following properties: padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. Each property affects the padding on only one side of the box's content, giving you more flexibility and customization. In the example above, only the bottom side of the paragraph's content will have a padding of 10 pixels because we specifically use padding bottom here in the example. All right, now we're going to put this to use. In a single line, set the navigation dot, the dot navigation LI element to have 20 pixels of padding. Click run and observe the changes. So let's scroll here and we are going to edit the padding. So it's just going to be regular padding, it looks like. We're going to set that to 20 pixels. And then we're just going to see where the navigation class is. There's class, and then, so it's going to be up here. From our HTML here. Yep. So let's try it out. Yep. I thought I did. In a single line, set the navigation li elements to have 20 pixels of padding. Oh, I forgot my semicolon. There we go. Run that. Beautiful. It still ran, as we all saw, but the syntax was not correct. All right, so next we're going to look at the red boxes at the bottom of the web page. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Here are red boxes. And we're going to set the share class elements to have 14 pixels of padding in the style.css file and run our code. So we're going to scroll to share. Okay. And then we're going to hit padding. We're going to set that equal to 14 pixels. Then don't forget our semicolon there. And this is what we're looking at. Let's go ahead and run it and see what the difference is here. Beautiful. It enlarged it. But lastly, we're going to set the top and bottom padding of H2 elements to 20 pixels and the left and right padding of H2 elements to 30 pixels. Okay. We can do that. Let's give me padding top. That's going to be set to 20px with our semicolon. We're going to be padding dash at the bottom, colon, 20 pixels, to our semicolon. Padding left, oops, padding left. We're going to set that to 30 pixels. And padding right, set that to 30 pixels as well. It's in the color. So the H2 element, I remember that being this here. So let's see what happens once we adjust this padding. All right. Okay, so now the edges of our border is lining up with the rest of the text on the page. Cool. All right, next. Now, padding shorthand. Another implementation of the padding property lets you specify exactly how much padding there should be on each side of the content in a single declaration. A declaration that uses multiple properties as values is known as a shorthand property. Padding shorthand lets you specify all of the padding properties as values on a single line. Padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. You can specify these properties in a few different ways. Cool. So in the example above, the four values, 6, pixels, 11 pixels, 4 pixels, 9 pixels correspond to the amount of padding on each side in a clockwise rotation. In order, it specifies the padding top value, the padding right value, the padding bottom value, and the padding left value of the content. So that's in 4 values. In 3 values, if the left and right sides of the content can be equal, the padding shorthand property allows for 3 values to be specified. The first value sets the padding top value, the second value sets the padding left and right values, and the third value sets the padding bottom value. Okay, now if it's 2 values, um, so and finally, if the top and bottom sides can be equal, the left and right sides can be equal, you can specify 2 values. The first value sets the padding top and the padding top and the padding bottom values, and the second value sets the padding left and the padding right values. Okay, so now we're going to put this to use. So first we're going to change the individual padding declarations on the H2 selector rule set to use padding shorthand with 2 values. Okay, so we're going to group padding top and bottom, and we're going to group padding left and right. So keep the padding for the top and bottom at 20 pixels and the value for the left and right padding at 30 pixels. Okay. It was on H2. Okay, here we are. So it would look something like, we're gonna take all this off, padding, whoa, padding, and then 20 pixel, 30 pixel, semicolon. And then this is our H2, I believe. Let's run that and see if it's still the same. Beautiful, still the same. And it's much less typing. So now using 2 values for the padding property, set the padding of the P element to 10 pixels on the top and bottom and 20 pixels on the left and right. So let's find our paragraph element. Here it is. And we do padding. And then top and bottom is going to be 10 pixels. And then left and right is going to be 20 pixels. Do our semicolon. Then let's find our paragraph element really quickly, just so we know what we're looking at. All right, it's going to be all of this. It looks like all the way down to attributes. Yep, see it ends here, it ends here. So all of this text is what we are going to be editing. Let's go back to our CSS file and run that. What it did, it seemed like the text got more narrow. Okay, let's move along. All right, so now we're on our margin. So far, we've learned about the following components of the box model. We have content, borders, and padding. The fourth and final component of the box model is margin. Margin refers to the space directly outside of the box. The margin property is used to specify the size of this space. Okay. The code in the example above will place 20 pixels of space on the outside of the paragraphs box on all 4 sides. This means that other HTML elements on the page cannot come within 20 pixels of the paragraph's border. Okay. If you want to be even more specific about the amount of margin on each side of a box, you can use the following properties: margin top, right, bottom, left. Each property affects the margin on only one side of the box, providing more flexibility and customization. It's the same with our border, looks like, and our padding. In the example above, only the right side of the paragraph's box will have a margin of 15 pixels. It is common to see margin values used for a specific side of an element. Okay. So now we're going to set the top margin of our paragraph elements to 60 pixels. I was about to say 60 pickles. So our P elements. Did I pass that? Our P element. Here. Now we're going to do margin, just leave top to 60 pixels. The semicolon goes out. All right, and this is the content that we're editing. Let's run that and see if you can notice the difference at all. So it looks like more space was added here. More space was added here to really differentiate between the paragraph elements because they're two separate elements. All right, now we're going to look at three red boxes. We're going to look at the three red boxes at the bottom of the web page. These elements are anchor elements of the class.share element. Set these share A elements to have a margin of 10 pixels. Okay, here's our share class. Then we're going to set the margin of 10 pixels. It doesn't specify which side of the margin. So we're just going to margin and set it to 10 pixel. Close it out with a semicolon. And here's what it looks like now. Let's run it. Now this is what it looks like now. It's a little bit more spaced out. All right, next. So a margin shorthand now. If you don't want equal margins on all four sides of the box and don't have the time to separate properties for each side, you're in luck. Margin can be written as a shorthand property as well. The shorthand syntax for margins is the same as padding. So if you're feeling comfortable with that, skip to the instructions. Otherwise, read on to learn how to use the margin shorthand. Okay, four values, we'll just use this as a refresher because we just went over this. So for four values, it's going to go in the clockwise. So the first value is going to be top, the second right, the third bottom, the fourth left. For three values, it's going to be the first value is going to be the top, the second one is going to be left and right, and then the third value is going to be the bottom. And then for two values, it's going to be both your top and bottom. They're going to be the first one, and then the second value is going to be left and right. Make sense? So for our instructions, we're going to use, using two values, we're going to set the H2 element top and bottom margins to 30 pixels and the left-right margins to 20 pixels. So let's go ahead and scroll to our H2. We do margin, our top and bottom. That's going to be our first value. Set 30 pixels. And our second value set is going to be 20 pixels. I'm going to close that out with a semicolon. And this right here was our H2. Run it. It looks like more space was added here. Awesome. Next. All right, no auto. The margin property also lets you center content. However, you must follow a few syntax requirements. Take a look at the following example. In the example above, margin is set to 0 auto. Margin set to 0 auto will center the divs in their containing elements. The 0 sets the top and bottom margins to 0 pixels. The auto value instructs the browser to adjust the left and right margins until the element is centered within its containing element. In order to center an element, a width must be set for that element. Okay, in order to center an element, a width must be set for that element. Otherwise, the width of the div or division element will be automatically set to the full width of its containing element. Like the body, for example. It's it's not possible to center an element that takes up the full width of the page, since the width of the page can change due to display and/or browser window size. In the example above, the width of the div element is set to 400 pixels, which is less than the width of most screens. This will cause the div to center within a containing element that is greater than 400 pixels wide. Alrighty, so now we're going to set the width of the pool-quote class elements to 350 pixels. So let's go ahead and find that. Pool quote, we're going to set the width to 350 pixels. Don't forget our semicolon. Okay, see, I didn't check the HTML file. I don't know what just happened. In one line, set the vertical top and bottom margins of the pull quote class to 0 and the horizontal left-right margins to auto. We can do that right here. It's going to look exactly like our example here on the left. It's going to be 0 and auto. Press the colon. Let's just double check. 0 and the horizontal left and right margins to auto. This one. Right. So now we're going to set the vertical margins of the main ID element to 0 and the horizontal margins to auto. So let's find main. Let's find main. Here it is. We're going to do margin. We're going to set top and bottom to 0, left and right to auto. And then we're going to do our semicolon. Let's look at main before we find here it is. We're going to find that. So that's going to be this text right here. And now we're going to go here and just run it. So that just centered our text. All right, next. Now we're going to talk about margin collapse. So as we have seen, padding is space added inside an element's border, while margin is space added outside an element's border. One additional difference is that top and bottom margins, also called vertical margins, collapse, while top and bottom padding does not. Horizontal margins, left and right, like padding, are always displayed and added together. For example, if two division elements with IDs of div1 and div2 are next to each other, they will be as far apart as the sum of their adjacent margins. Makes sense. So here is the sum. That's 1 and 2. And the space between them is the sum of both their margins here. So here in this example, the space between the image 1 and image 2 borders is 40 pixels because the margin of image 1 is 20 and the margin of image 2 is also 20. So together, the space between the both of them is 40. Makes sense. Quick maths, quick maths. Okay. Unlike horizontal margins, vertical margins do not add. Instead, the larger of the two vertical margins sets the distance between adjacent elements. Cool. So in this example, the vertical margin between the image 1 and image 2 elements is 30 pixels. Although the sum of the margins is 50 pixels, the margin collapses, so the spacing is only dependent on the image 1 bottom margin. Okay. It may be helpful to it may be helpful to think of collapsing vertical margins as a short person trying to push a taller person. The tall person has longer arms and can easily push the short person, while the person with the short arms cannot reach the person with long arms. Makes sense. All right, instructions. Study the graphic display to the right. Elements A and B have 20 pixels of horizontal margins. So horizontal is going to be left and right. Right? Yes, it's going to be left and right. And so elements A and B have 20 pixels of horizontal margins of the sum of each element's margin. Elements A and C have 30 pixels of vertical margins, which is top and bottom, the top margin of element C. Oh, next. All right, minimum and maximum height and width. Because a web page can be viewed through displays of differing screen size, the content on the web page can suffer from those changes in size. To avoid this problem, CSS offers two properties that can limit how narrow or how wide an element's box can be sized to. Min width, which is the property that ensures a minimum width of an element's box, and then max width, which is the property that ensures a maximum width of an element's box. So in the example above, the width of all paragraphs will not shrink below 300 pixels, nor will the width exceed 600 pixels. Content, like text, can become difficult to read when a browser window is narrowed or expanded. These two properties ensure that the content is legible by limiting the minimum and maximum widths of an element. You can also limit the minimum and maximum height of an element, which is min height. This property ensures a minimum height for an element's box, and then max height, which ensures a maximum height for an element's box. All right, in the example above, so there's that. In the example above, the height of all paragraphs will not shrink below 150 pixels, and the height will not exceed 300 pixels. What will happen to the content if an element's box, what will happen to the contents of an element's box if the max height property is set too low? It's possible for the content to spill outside of the box, resulting in content that is not legible. You'll learn how to work around this issue in the next exercise. So now in the CSS file, set the minimum width of the paragraph element to 200 pixels. So let's scroll to our paragraph element. Scroll. We're going to set the min. It's going to be min width to 200 pixels and our semicolon. After you've done this successfully, resize the browser and notice how the paragraphs box will no longer shrink below 200 pixels. So here's our paragraphs, uno and dos. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay, I suppose it's not gonna get any smaller than this. Next, we're gonna set the maximum width of the P elements to 800 pixels. So we're already here, we're gonna do max dash width, 800 pixels. It looks beautiful to me. Let's run that. Looks the same. So in the CSS file, set the min height of the P element to 200 pixels. So min height to 200 pixels. Whoa, 200 pixels. Looks the same. And we're going to do the max height to 300 pixels. 300 pixels. Running it. Okay, now that changed something here. When we did that max height. After you've done this successfully, resize the browser and notice how the height of the paragraph box will no longer span beyond 300 pixels. You should see your text overflowing. In the next exercise, we will fix that. Okay, so as we can see here, this is what it looks like when text overflows. It's kind of like overlapping on one another. Oh yeah, oh yeah. All right here, it's overflow. All right, next. Now we're going to talk about overflow. So all of the components of the box model comprise an element's size. For example, an image that has the following dimensions is 364 pixels wide and 244 pixels tall. Okay, that's a lot of different adjustments. The total dimensions, 364 pixels by 244 pixels, are calculated by adding all the vertical dimensions together and all the horizontal dimensions together. Sometimes these components result in an element that is larger than the parent's containing area. How can we ensure that we can view all of an element that is larger than its parent containing area, and its parent's containing area? The overflow property controls what happens to content that spills or overflows outside its box. The most commonly used values are hidden. So when set to this value, any content that overflows will be hidden from view. Scroll. So when set to this value, a scroll bar will be added to the elements box so that the rest of the content can be viewed by scrolling. And then visible. So when set to this value, the overflow content will be displayed outside of the containing element. Note, this is the default value. From here, in this example, overflow is set to scroll. So in the example above, if any of the paragraph content overflows, perhaps a user resizes their browser window, a scroll bar will appear so that users can view the rest of the content. The overflow property is set on a parent element to instruct the web browser on how to render child elements. For example, if a div's overflow property is set to scroll, all children of this div will display overflowing content with a scroll bar. Simple enough. For a more in-depth look at overflow, including additional properties like overflow X and overflow Y that separate out the horizontal and vertical values, head over to the MDN documentation. Okay, I will add this link in the description so that we have more resources over this. Alrighty, now moving on, in order to see the impact of overflow set to scroll, first change the height of the main ID element to 10 to 1,000 pixels. Whoops. All right, so we're looking for main. We're going to do overflow. Just kidding. We're going to do height 1,000 pixels, semicolon. And let me just see what content we're editing. Okay, the state's latest conservation efforts. This is what we're going to be editing. So this right here. And what we did was we adjusted the height to 1,000 pixels. Let's run that. Set the overflow of the main element to scroll. When you scroll down, a second scroll bar should appear over the paragraph section. You may have to expand the component, the browser component in order to see this behavior clearly. Oh, all right. This is what it looks like. So here in the main element, we're going to set overflow to scroll and do a semicolon and click run. Oh, so now we can scroll. That's pretty cool. That's what that looks like. All right, next. Now we are going to be talking about resetting defaults. So all major web browsers have a default style sheet they use in the absence of an external style sheet. These default style sheets are known as user agent style sheets. In this case, the term user agent is a technical term for the browser. User agent style sheets often have default CSS rules that set default values for padding and margin. This affects how the browser displays HTML elements, which can make it difficult for a developer to design or style a web page. Many developers choose to reset these default values so that they can truly work with a clean slate. Example, just the wild card or the universal. Yeah. The code in the example above resets the default margin and padding values of an HTML element, of all HTML elements, excuse me. It is often the first CSS rule in an external style sheet. Note that both properties are set to 0. When these properties are set to 0, they do not require a unit of measurement. Nice. So in the style.css file, reset the default margin and padding values for the body. What happens to the web page in the browser? All right, so here's the body. All right, so we still have that scroll on. Now we're just going to set the margin to 0. We're going to set the padding to 0 as well. And run that. All right, we still have scroll bar. I'm not sure what changed. Let's take it out real quick. So here's what it looks like when the margin and padding was set to 0. Let's find that. And this is what it looks like when it's not set to 0. Okay, looks like the content is a little bit more narrow. Let's see if that's accurate or not. I really can't tell. Let's find that. No. Yeah, I can't tell the difference. That's okay. Next. All right, visibility. Elements can be hidden from view with the visibility property. The visibility property can be set to one of the following values: hidden, which hides an element; visible, which displays an element; and collapse, which obviously collapses an element. All right, here we have an unordered list. And then our CSS is referencing this class feature, and we're going to hide the donate. We're going to hide this class. That's what it looks like. So in the example above, the list item with the class of future will be hidden from view in the browser. Keep in mind, however, that users can still view the contents of the list item, example donate, by viewing the source code in their browser. How many users do we know are using the developer tools in a browser? Furthermore, this is the perfect time to show y'all how to do that. So in order to actually do this here, to view the source code in your browser, you would go to developer tools. So you click the 3 dots if you're in a Chrome browser, and then you would scroll down to more tools. And then right here at the bottom, we'll see developer tools. then we can see the code of this page. So this is how we view the source code of the page. Hope it helps. Yeah. All right. You can exit out of that. Furthermore, the web page will only hide the contents of the element. It will still have an empty space where the element is intended to display. Note, what's the difference between display none and visibility hidden? An element with display none will be completely removed from the web page. An element with visibility set to hidden, however, will not be visible on the web page, but the space reserved for it will. In our instructions, we are going to take a look at the list items in the index.html file and notice that the list item donate has a class of donate. In the CSS file, add a class selector rule set for donate, set the visibility to hidden. Okay, so let's take a look at the list items here in our HTML file first. So here's our list items. Okay, so the list item donate does have a class of donate. So in the CSS file, we're going to add a class selector rule set for donate. Okay, so I think it's going to look something like navigation li.donate. So, yep, because when we reference, so there was one that referenced navigation li.logo. That one was this here. So in order to reference donate, we're going to do navigation.li. Let me copy that. I wonder if we can add it anywhere. It kind of seems like it makes sense for like right here. Paste. Then we're going to put donate here. Open up our curly braces. I'm going to set the visibility hidden. There's semicolon. Okay, it looks beautiful to me. Let's run it. Oh, so the space is still there, but donate is not there anymore. Cool. Right, next. Alrighty. So that completes this lesson. We're just going to go over the review. So in this lesson, we covered the 4 properties of the box model, which is the height and width, padding, borders, and margins. Understanding the box model is an important step towards learning more advanced HTML and CSS topics. So let's take a minute to review what we have learned together. So the box model comprises a set of properties used to create space around and between HTML elements. We learned that the height and width of a content area can be set in pixels or percentages. We learned that borders surround the content area and padding of an element. The color, style, and thickness of a border can be set with CSS properties. We learned that padding is the space between the content area and the border, and it can be set in pixels or percentage as well. We learned that margin is the amount of spacing outside of an element's border. Also, that horizontal margins add, so the total space between the borders of adjacent elements is equal to the sum of the right margin of one of the elements and the left margin of the adjacent element. And we learned that vertical margins collapse, so the space between vertically adjacent elements is equal to the larger margin. We also learned that margin set to 0 auto horizontally centers an element inside of its parent content area if it has a width. We learned that overflow property can be set to display, hidden, or scroll, and dictates how HTML will render content that overflows its parent content area. And then lastly, we learned that The visibility property can hide or show elements. All right, now we're going to make some adjustments to the code in the code editor and see if we can improve the appearance of the page by changing the following properties. Um, okay. Now this overflow scroll, I'm not a fan of this. I'm going to take that out. Okay, run. Beautiful. Um, Now this height, 1,000 pixels. I'm just gonna take that off too. Let's run that. Better, 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 better. Now I did like the separation. Um, okay, okay, there is a separation between paragraphs. The image, background image, background size. Let's change the height to like 500. Run that. Okay, see, I made the image a little shorter. I felt like it was kind of long. And then I would like for the donate to be visible, me personally. So I'm gonna take that. Run it. Beautiful. That just makes sense to me. All right. That looks good to me. Thank you all so much. Let's see if we have a quiz to do together. Quickly wrap this up. Next. Okay, I don't think we have a quiz. So until next time, we will start here on this next lesson. And as I said, until next time, thanks so much.